All right, let's get started with our deep dive today.
Sounds good.
Today we're going way back to ancient Mesopotamia,
Oh, very cool.
and we're going to be looking at a city called Uruk.
Okay.
And specifically, we're going to be talking about why this is considered the world's first true city.
Sounds like a good plan.
So to get us started, can you maybe paint us a picture
Oh, sure.
of what Uruk would have looked like in its heyday?
Yeah, imagine yourself like a traveler.
Okay.
You've been walking across this like sun-baked landscape,
Yeah.
for weeks.
Okay.
And all you've seen are just these small villages kind of
Isn't it?
dotting the horizon. And then suddenly, rising out of like the dust, you see it.
Wow.
This sprawling city.
Okay.
Unlike anything that the world has ever seen.
Well.
This is Uruk.
Wow. Okay. So to understand kind of how we got to this point
Sure.
of having these like massive cities,
Yeah.
we need to go back even further
Okay.
to a region known as the Fertile Crescent.
Right. The Fertile Crescent.
Okay.
Exactly.
So remind us, where is that and why was it so important to this story?
Yeah. So the Fertile Crescent is that arc of land that stretches from, like modern day Iraq through Syria and into Turkey.
Okay.
And it was called the Fertile Crescent for a reason.
I would assume so, yeah.
I mean, think about like fertile soil, rivers teeming with fish,
Yeah.
a real diversity of like plants and animals.
Abundance.
Abundance, exactly.
Okay.
So this abundance allowed people to settle down in one place
Okay.
instead of constantly moving around looking for food.
Got it.
So, this is where we start to see the very beginnings of agriculture and permanent settlements.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the food and resources in one place, you're not going to move around.
Right.
So we know that there were settlements before Uruk in this region.
Yes.
Places like Jericho and
Right.
Dadahoyuk.
Exactly.
But those never quite reached city status, did they?
No, they didn't, but they were big, right?
Yeah.
They were very complex.
Oh.
They had quite elaborate architecture for the time.
yeah.
But they didn't have all of the characteristics that we associate with a true city, so Uruk really stands out.
Interesting. So what do you think set Uruk apart?
One factor that stands out is the environment.
Okay.
So, around 5000 BC, the Persian Gulf was actually a lot larger
Oh,
than
wow.
it is today.
Okay.
It extended much further inland,
Okay.
and this created this unique environment, a landscape of like marshes and lagoons,
Okay.
just incredibly rich ecosystems,
yeah.
really teeming with life.
Yeah, so it's not just fertile soil.
No, it's way more than that.
Yeah.
It's this like abundance of resources that drew people to this region.
Right, it's like a magnet almost.
It is. And you've got to think this abundance combined with those rising sea levels
Okay.
created this kind of pressure cooker.
Oh, interesting.
The population density in this region just increased dramatically.
Okay.
And so people had to find new ways to organize themselves,
Yeah.
manage these resources. It's almost like Uruk was born out of necessity.
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
That just because of these environmental changes, it forced people to come together
Right.
in a different way and create these new systems.
Exactly.
So, I mean, we keep saying city,
Right.
but, we've talked about Jericho, we've talked about Dadahoyuk,
Yeah.
they were settlements.
Right.
What are the hallmarks of Uruk that really make it a city, like a true city?
Well, for one, the sheer size of Uruk was unprecedented.
Okay.
So it's estimated that Uruk had, at its peak, maybe as many as 80,000 people.
Wow.
Now, to put that in perspective, Rome, at its height, only had about twice that.
That's unbelievable. 80,000 people
It is. It's
in
massive.
that time period.
I know. It's just
Ah.
mind-blowing.
Wow. Well,
But it's more than just the population size, right?
yeah.
Uruk had a level of complexity and sophistication that you just don't see in earlier settlements.
Okay.
Think massive temples, sprawling city walls, specialized labor, and even like the development of writing.
Wow.
This is really where we see like the true birth of civilization.
Okay, so let's dig into some of those characteristics that you mentioned.
Sure.
First, I want to talk about the temples.
Okay.
I mean, we know that religion played a huge role in Mesopotamian culture.
Absolutely.
What can you tell us about the temples of Uruk and their significance?
Yeah. So the temples weren't just places of worship.
Okay.
They were like economic and political centers.
Oh, okay.
The two most prominent temples in Uruk were the Ana, which was dedicated to Anu, the sky god,
Okay.
and the Ayana, which was dedicated to Inanna, the goddess of love and war.
Interesting. Okay.
And these were monumental structures. They were constantly being rebuilt and expanded upon.
Okay.
They employed vast numbers of people, they managed all kinds of resources, and they controlled trade.
So they were almost like cities within the city.
Yeah, they were almost like mini cities within the city.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And speaking of trade, Uruk was known for its extensive trade networks.
Yes.
How did they manage to transport all these goods across such vast distances?
Well, this is where things get really interesting.
Right.
So around the same time that Uruk was emerging,
Okay.
we see the invention of two really crucial technologies, the wheel and the donkey.
Oh, wow. Talk about game changers.
Right, game changers, exactly.
So now you have the donkey to carry the heavy loads and the wheel to transport them more efficiently.
Exactly.
Suddenly your trade networks can expand dramatically.
Right, and we have archaeological evidence to prove it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Uruk pottery has been found as far away as Egypt and the Indus Valley.
Yeah.
So that shows you the reach and influence of this ancient city.
That's incredible. So we have this massive sprawling city,
Yeah,
bustling with trade, all this religious activity.
it's a happening place.
But I imagine managing all of this complexity must have presented some serious challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine trying to keep track of all the goods flowing in and out of the city.
Yeah.
The labor needed for those huge temples.
Yeah.
The transactions between all those merchants.
Right.
I mean, it would have been a nightmare without a system for record keeping.
And that leads us to another incredible innovation that came out of Uruk. Writing.
That's right, writing.
Amazing.
You know, and it's important to remember that writing didn't start with people wanting to, write poetry or chronicle history.
Right.
It emerged out of this very practical need
Okay.
to manage the complexities of this urban life.
Okay.
So they started with these cylinder seals, right, to kind of mark ownership.
Okay.
And then they started using clay tokens inside these bullae, which are these little clay envelopes, to represent goods.
Okay.
And eventually they developed cuneiform script.
Wow.
These little wedge-shaped marks impressed on these clay tablets.
So something that we take for granted today, like writing a shopping list, comes from these people trying to figure out how to manage this incredibly complex city.
Exactly. It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
And here's the best part.
Okay.
We even have the name of one of these early record keepers.
Oh, really?
His name was Kushim.
Kushim.
Yeah, Kushim. And his name appears on a clay tablet.
Okay.
It's a receipt
Oh, what?
recording a transaction of a large quantity of barley.
So he was like an accountant?
He was like an accountant, yeah.
That's amazing.
Isn't it great
Wow.
that we have his name?
Yeah, and that we can connect to an individual like that
I know.
across such a vast distance of time.
But no, it's really incredible.
It really humanizes it.
Yeah, and it reminds us that Uruk, for all its grandeur and innovation,
Right.
was ultimately a place where real people lived,
Yeah.
worked,
Yeah.
and made history.
But as we know, not all of Uruk's story is this kind of one of progress and achievement.
Right.
There's a darker side to this ancient city that we need to explore.
You're right, there is.
And that's what we're going to do after a short break, so stay tuned.
Okay.
So we're back, and we're talking about the not-so-bright side of Uruk.
Yeah, the darker side.
This idea exploitation of labor,
Right.
rising militarism, it's kind of jarring to think about,
It is.
considering all of the advancements that we were talking about.
It is, but it's a crucial part
Yeah.
of understanding, Uruk and the whole story of civilization, really.
Right, right.
I mean, progress and innovation, they often come at a cost, sadly.
Yeah.
And Uruk is a really powerful example of that.
So let's talk about this exploitation of labor.
Okay.
You mentioned slavery being present
Yeah.
in Uruk. What kind of evidence do we have of that?
The most direct evidence comes from those cuneiform tablets.
Okay.
We have actual records of individuals being bought and sold
Oh.
and inherited, just like any other possession.
Wow. So they're treating people
It's pretty rough.
like property.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that for some people in Uruk, life was just brutal
Yeah.
and dehumanized.
And that must have been such a shift
It was.
from earlier societies where people were living in smaller, more egalitarian groups.
Yeah, I mean, in those societies, the idea of owning another human being was probably just unthinkable.
Right, right.
But as cities grew,
Yeah.
and, Uruk being the first,
Yeah.
they developed more hierarchical social structures. And so
Wow.
you had this small elite
Right.
controlling most of the resources and the power.
And relying on this this underclass
Yeah.
to basically keep things running.
Exactly. I mean, you need people to build your temples,
Yeah.
maintain your irrigation systems,
Right.
produce goods for trade.
Right.
And a lot of that labor came from people who were either enslaved or in some form of forced labor.
So it wasn't just like outright slavery.
No, not always.
There are other like more nuanced.
Yeah, more
Right.
nuanced like debt bondage,
Right.
where people were essentially forced to work off their debts.
Okay.
You also had indentured servitude, where individuals were like bound to work for a certain period of time.
So it's still very unequal.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's less brutal than, chattel slavery,
Right.
but it still points to this deep inequality
Yeah.
that was built into the system.
And I guess that's the question. Like, was this
Yeah.
really essential to Uruk's success?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, some historians argue
Yeah.
that, these massive projects,
Yeah.
the temples, the walls, the irrigation systems,
Yeah.
they just wouldn't have been possible without this readily available source
I could
of
believe that.
really cheap or free labor.
Right. So in some ways, it's like saying that Uruk's grandeur was built on
Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow.
the backs of these
Yeah, it's a difficult truth,
exploited people.
but one that we have to confront.
Yeah.
I mean, Uruk's story, like so many other early civilizations,
Yeah.
is one of both these incredible achievements
Yeah.
and really deep moral compromises.
Right. And it's hard.
Yeah. Looking back now to know
Right.
if there was another way.
It really makes you wonder, like, if we could go back and change things,
Yeah.
would they have been able to accomplish all of that
Yeah.
without resorting to those practices?
Yeah. It's hard to know.
Yeah. It's a great question and one that we can only speculate about.
Right. And I guess like the bigger question too that you're getting at is like, are progress and exploitation
Yeah.
inextricably linked?
That's the big question.
I mean, that's a question.
And it's one that still resonates today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we've talked about the exploitation of labor.
Right.
Let's switch now to the other
Yeah.
darker element that you talked about.
Okay.
Militarism.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about warfare in Uruk?
So by the late 4th millennium BC,
Okay.
there's a clear shift
Okay.
towards a much more militarized society.
How do we know that?
Well, we see depictions of warfare
Okay.
becoming more and more common in art.
Okay.
And those massive walls around Uruk.
Yeah. Suggest a growing preoccupation with defense
Okay.
and potentially even aggression.
So it's not just about protecting what they have.
No, it's also about projecting power outward,
Yeah.
maybe even expanding their territory.
And as they're growing, they're going to be coming into conflict with their neighbors.
Exactly. You've got these different settlements
Right.
competing for resources, control of trade routes.
Yeah.
It's inevitable that you're going to have conflict.
And I imagine internally that has an impact as well.
It does. It does. I mean, warfare often leads to this consolidation of power
Right.
in the hands of a warrior elite.
Okay.
And it creates a demand for resources, right?
Right.
Weapons, armor,
Yeah.
that further incentivizes the exploitation of labor.
Right. So it's like
It's a vicious cycle.
it feeds on itself.
It really does, yeah.
Conflict breeds exploitation, which then breeds more conflict.
Exactly. And sadly, it's a pattern
Yeah.
you see repeated throughout history.
So we have this city,
Yeah.
right, that gave us writing,
Yeah,
large-scale agriculture,
right.
monumental architecture.
It's amazing.
But it was also a place that was built on inequality
Right.
and violence.
That's right.
What does Uruk's story tell us about
It's the big question, isn't it?
civilization?
Yeah.
I mean, is this inherent to who we are?
Well, Uruk faces us to confront this uncomfortable truth
Okay.
that civilization, with all its benefits, with all its advancements, often has this really dark underbelly.
Yeah.
And it compels us to think about those trade-offs, right?
Yeah.
The trade-offs that have been made in the pursuit of progress.
Right.
To ask ourselves, like, is there a different path?
Yeah.
A different way to build a society that's more just and equitable?
And maybe that's Uruk's real legacy.
Maybe it is.
It's not just the achievements,
Right.
but the questions that it raises
Right.
about who we are,
Exactly.
what we value.
Studying Uruk isn't just about uncovering the past.
Yeah.
It's about understanding ourselves and the choices that we face as we build the future.
And speaking of the future, Uruk's story doesn't end here, right?
No, it doesn't.
It continues through history, in literature, in art,
It echoes.
in the very fabric of our cities today.
Exactly, it does.
And that's what we'll explore in our next segment.
Sounds good.
All right, welcome back to the Deep Dive.
It's good to be back.
We've been on quite a journey,
We have.
exploring the rise of Uruk, the world's first city.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
We've seen its incredible achievements, the technological innovations, its cultural vibrancy, but also, like we talked about before the break,
Yeah.
its darker side,
Yeah, that's right.
the exploitation, the conflict.
Yeah, it's important to remember that.
That seems to be, inherent in this city.
Yeah, it really makes you think about, like, the nature of cities in general.
Yeah, it's like Uruk's holding up a mirror
It is.
to our own modern world, reflecting.
Yeah, reflecting both our aspirations and our failings. It's really powerful.
And I think, one of the most powerful ways that we can connect with Uruk
Yeah,
is through the stories that it left behind.
absolutely.
And specifically, I'm thinking about the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, yeah, Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk.
This legendary hero embarks on a quest for immortality.
It's a classic story.
What does this story tell us about Uruk and its place in the world?
Well, first of all, the fact that Uruk produced such a sophisticated work of literature,
Yeah.
it really speaks volumes
Correct.
about its cultural achievements. I
Yeah.
mean, the Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the oldest known works of literature in the world.
Right.
And it really is a testament to, the power of storytelling,
Yeah.
the development of this complex writing system.
It's not just a good story, though.
No, it's so much more than that.
It's deeply connected to the city itself
Absolutely.
and the beliefs and values of the people who live there.
Totally. I mean, the epic is full of descriptions of Uruk.
Okay.
The massive walls, bustling streets, towering temples.
And Gilgamesh himself is portrayed as a builder.
He is. He's a king.
Yeah.
Wants to leave a lasting legacy for his city.
And there's that really interesting connection between Gilgamesh and Inanna.
Oh, yeah. Inanna, the goddess of Uruk.
She's not just some distant deity.
No, she's very active in this story.
Yeah.
Shaping events.
Right.
Challenging Gilgamesh on his journey.
And it's almost as if she embodies
Punk says.
those contrasting aspects of Uruk.
Yeah.
The creativity and the destruction, the innovation, the exploitation.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Like, it's all there in her character.
And it's not just Inanna. The
Yeah.
whole epic of Gilgamesh, like Uruk itself,
Right.
is full of these contradictions.
Right.
It's the story about ambition, this quest for immortality.
Right.
But it's also this really profound meditation on the limits of human power,
Yeah.
the inevitability of death.
And ultimately, Gilgamesh fails
He does.
in his quest for immortality.
Yeah, and he learns that true immortality doesn't lie in living forever,
Yeah.
but in the legacy we leave behind.
Right. The impact we have on the world.
And it's a really powerful message,
Especially coming from a story set in the world's first city.
Yeah, it really is. And it kind of reminds us that even in a place as grand and innovative as Uruk,
Yeah.
human life was still finite.
Right. Right.
And that meaning was found in the connections we make,
Yeah.
the stories that we tell.
I mean, it makes you wonder if those early inhabitants of Uruk
Yeah.
could see the world today.
I know. What would they think?
What would they think? Would they recognize themselves
I don't know.
in our modern cities?
I mean, I think they would understand the challenges we face,
Yeah.
the problems of urbanization, overcrowding, inequality, environmental degradation.
Yeah, those were present.
They were all there.
Back then, back in Uruk.
So in a way, their story
Yeah.
isn't just this historical curiosity. It's
Yeah.
like a cautionary tale.
It is. It is a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
That progress isn't always linear,
That's right.
and that the choices that we made today, they're going to shape the world for future generations.
Absolutely. Uruk's legacy is both inspiring and challenging, I think.
I
It
agree.
reminds us what humans are capable of achieving,
Yeah.
but also, the potential pitfalls that
Yeah.
come with concentrated power and unchecked ambition.
Right. It's a call to action,
It is.
to be more mindful of the ways that we build our cities,
Yes.
our societies, to learn from those mistakes.
And to strive for a future where progress is measured.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of technological advancement,
Right.
but also social justice and sustainability.
Well said. So the next time you find yourself in a city,
Yeah.
whether it's a bustling metropolis
Right.
or a quiet town,
Yeah.
take a moment
Think about Uruk.
to think about Uruk,
Yeah.
that world's first city,
It's amazing.
and the enduring lessons it holds for us all.
Really makes you think.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another exploration into the fascinating world of history and ideas.